Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Kidley, and welcome to our continuing coverage of E3 2016. Unfortunately, Jalen couldn't make it for this one, so I'm going to be doing this one solo. And this one is the recap of the Microsoft press event. So, Microsoft kicked off with Gears of War 4, and they did mention that it's going to feature cross-play between Windows 10 and the Xbox One, and will be released on 10/11/2016. Now, traditionally, I've been a big fan of the Gears of War series. I played the first four. I was really into that original storyline, which is the first three with Marcus and Dom and Coltrane and that entire group. This one is actually going to pick up after that storyline. So you're actually playing the son of Marcus Phoenix, and you're taking on, whatever the new adventure is going to be. And the people that I've talked to, and I've talked to Jalen about this as well, it's kind of like, I don't know if I'm really into a new Gears of War at this point. It's like that original storyline was sort of the storyline that I was into, and I don't know, I'm kind of done with the series. But, you look at it, and you can see it on screen here, it looks great. It looks like it's going to play better than ever. So if you're a big fan of the Gears of War franchise, I'm sure you can't wait for this one. But for me, I don't know. I'm kind of 50-50 on it. Next up was Killer Instinct. They announced a new character for that game, and it's actually going to be Ram, and he was the bad guy from the very, very first Gears of War. Anybody who played that, you might remember the train sequence at the end, and you fought and you killed him. So he's actually going to be the new character in Killer Instinct. Next, they moved on to Forza Horizon 3. And for the Forza series, they have got their two games. They've got Forza Motorsports, which is their on-track version, and then Horizon is their open world, driving on sand, grass, water, whatever version of Forza. And for the first time ever, this one is going to feature a full co-op campaign, which is pretty cool. And of course, they're going to have the day-night cycles and rain effects and weather and all that. And again, you can see on the screen here, this one looks really good. I mean, the Forza games in general are some of the prettiest games out there. I mean, even the last one, which was Forza, misremembering the number, Forza 4 or 5. I think I actually have it sitting back there somewhere. But yeah, that game looked beautiful. And those are the kind of games that I'm into, are the actual track games. Personally, I'm not really into the open road games. But if you are someone who are into the open road games, this is probably going to be one that you'll want to pick up. Next was Recore, and this was a game that they actually showed for the first time last year at E3, and we got to see it again this year. And this is one game that I'm really, really looking forward to. It's basically some sort of a potential open world RPG-esque type game where you're playing this girl, and she's like a scout, and she has these robot companions. And what a Recore is, it's like these balls of energy, but it's not just like a ball of energy, it's like the consciousness of these robots. And so she's actually able to take these balls of energy, put them into different machines, and those machines are her like allies. There's also the blue energy balls and red energy balls, and the red ones are generally the evil ones or whatever. And I could be wrong on this, but I think she was actually able to take the red ones out, and that's actually one way of sort of destroying them. But I think she could actually turn a red one into a blue one. But overall, what we've seen of that game so far, it just looks really, really good. And it's going to be a new IP that hopefully has a lot of potential. Next up, they went to Final Fantasy 15. And this is a game that's been shown for months and months and months now. If you haven't seen anything on this, you can look up a lot more stuff on YouTube. But this is the Final Fantasy game that I think people have been wanting for a really, really long time. It's going to be something that's different, open world, more high action, faster paced, and just overall it looks pretty good. I'm not going to talk about that one too much because a lot of people have talked this one to death already. Next, they had Battlefield 1. And Battlefield 1 is going back to World War 1. If you didn't know, it's using the same engine that Star Wars Battlefront did. And, you know, if you played Star Wars Battlefront, you know that game looked absolutely fantastic. And then they're basically taking that and they're almost doing an upgrade to it, so it looks even better than Star Wars Battlefront. Sorry, I had to do a cut in the video there. There was a bird outside my window making noise. I don't know if the mic actually picked it up or not. Nature making noise, interrupted my videos. Alright, so we were, the next up on the list was Inside, which is a new indie game from the creators of Limbo. And this is going to be released on June 29th. So the Limbo creators have a really good track record, and all of their indie games are, you know, pretty good. So this is going to be another one that I think everybody should at least take a look at and, you know, look at the trailers and the videos and see if it's something that you're going to be into. Next up was We Happy Few. And this is one, you know, out of all the press events that I've watched so far at E3, this was one of the gameplay trailers where you're sitting there looking at the screen like this. Just... what am I watching? What is this? It was just really, really weird. So it was basically this guy sitting at a desk, and it's like, you need to take your medicine, son. And it's, I think it takes place like in the 50s or 60s or 70s or something like that. But it's weird. It's like all the characters had the, almost the V for Vendetta masks over their faces. Almost, you know, the clown style type stuff. Pardon me. And just the world overall was very, very weird. And then you met these kids and they had it. And at one point, they're hitting a pinata. And then the pinata explodes in blood. And then you look at the table again. It's not a pinata. It's like a dead rat. And then they all look at you and they're like, oh, he hasn't taken his medicine. Call the police. And it's like, wait, what? What is this? But it just looked really, really intriguing. Just really, really like, okay, this is creepy and weird and highly interesting. And so that game is going to be released on July 26th. I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on that one and see if it's any good. Next up, they went into Gwent, which is the card game for The Witcher. So the card game is actually going to be released separately now. It was so big in that game, they're releasing it separately. And one thing that they did mention about this is it's actually going to have its own single-player campaign in addition to the sort of the multiplayer gameplay. So people who like The Witcher and like Gwent, they should be pretty happy with that one. Next up, I'm going to talk about Dead Rising 4. They announced that game. And just briefly, it's an over-the-top, you know, zombie game or zombie shooter. So, you know, almost like Zombieland. So if you want Zombieland, the game, you know, take a look at Dead Rising 4. Next up was Scalebound. And this is another new IP that they showed last year. And a lot of people have really mixed reviews about this one. Visually, it looks great, and what they're doing with the story and the whole aesthetic looks really good, but the main character, I think, is what most people have issues with. It's like they took this Lord of the Rings fantasy-type setting, and then they found some punk kid from LA or something, and he's got the headphones on and stuff, and it's like, what are they doing here? And it's also kind of weird because the gameplay they showed last year was much better than the gameplay that they showed this year. So that's something else that sort of threw people off a little bit on this game. But the premise behind the game is the main character, you know, he's got the big Final Fantasy type sword, but he also has these powers. And I think it's just his arm. But anything he touches with his arm, you know, like a dragon scale, concrete, molten lava, you know, whatever it is, he actually gains that power or whatever. So he can, like, he's tough as dragon scales or whatever. And so it's got some really interesting ideas. But yeah, whether or not it's going to be any good in the end, I think this is one that you should definitely wait and see what the reviews are. Next up was the highly anticipated Sea of Thieves. This is another new IP that was shown last year, and they showed it again this year. This is being done by Rare, and again, they have a very, very good track record if you like any of those old school Rare games. But the core of Sea of Thieves is that you are a pirate or a rogue, and you actually have your own pirate ship. And you and your friends are able to go out onto the open sea, so to speak, in this open world game, and actually go around and get loot and shoot other ships, and each person is manning a different station. So it's like a full-size pirate ship. You have to have one person on the wheel, you got to have people on the cannons, you got to have people, if you want to raise and lower the anchor, you got to have people doing that, doing different things with the sails, they have to do that. So if you've ever played a game like Guns of Icarus, or anything where it's, a ship with stations and you have to have people working together, it's that kind of game. So it looks really interesting. It has a really nice art style, and it's going to be really interesting to see if this game is a success. Because I don't know how well it's going to work if you're just playing by yourself. I don't know if maybe you can't play it by yourself. They didn't really touch on that, because of both times I've seen this game, it's always been about a group of people working together. So next up was A State of Decay 2. It's another open world zombie game. There's a lot of these out, and so there really isn't too much more I can say about it. And finally, the last game that they showed was Halo Wars 2. This is the Halo RTS. I think the first one was fairly popular, and so a lot of people are just sort of waiting to see what they're doing with this one, what changes they're making, because they basically, they're just showing trailers, they're just showing gameplay, so it looks good, but how does it play, we don't really know. And then finally, the last thing for the Microsoft press event is they announced a new Xbox One, and this is something that everybody's doing. Sony has a new PS4 coming out. It's called like the PS 4.5. They all have these names. And then Nintendo has the new NX coming out, which is actually a completely new thing. And then so Microsoft, they're like, well, we've got to do it too if everybody's upgrading their hardware. So the new Xbox One is going to be called Codename Scorpio, and it's going to come out in 2017. So just a few little pieces of information about the new Xbox One is it will feature upgraded hardware, will support 4K and VR. So if anybody's waiting for an Xbox One, you might want to wait for this upgraded one that comes out next year. But yeah, that was everything for the Microsoft press event. Theirs was pretty good. I think it's probably in the middle of the list. But overall, I think they showed some good stuff. Again, I mean, out of that list, ReCore, for me, is near the top of the list. And then that We Happy Few, that one is one that I'm really keeping my eye on. Maybe Scalebound, maybe Sea of Thieves. And I think that's pretty much all I'm really looking at for the new Xbox One. If Halo Wars 2 actually comes to PC and is good RTS, I might get into that too. But yep, that will go ahead and do it for this video, ladies and gentlemen. Stay tuned for our continuing coverage of E3 2016. For those who are watching this in order, the Sony press event is going to be coming up here real shortly. And we'll go ahead and we'll do the coverage on that. So everybody stay tuned, keep playing, and have fun.